Welcome to Free Talk Cast, where we talk about a variety of issues and subjects coming at it from a perspective of peace, love, and liberty. Of course, I'm Aria, and I'm joined by
Nikki.
And as you can hear, I'm actually recovering from being sick. It's actually been a hell of a week, man. I had a kidney infection throughout almost all of last week.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure it was a kidney infection. I never went to a doctor, but of course, most sorts of infections do clear up on their own. But my kidneys were in a tremendous amount of pain, and it lasted a period of about 4 days. That finally went away Sunday, and Sunday I felt great, other than waking up with a really sore throat. And of course, yesterday I woke up again with a sore throat and just feeling like crap in general, feeling like I had some sort of a cold. And today I thought I was fine until you got here, and I realized that that was the first time all day that I'd spoken at all.
Yeah.
And because I live here by myself and I just have a dog and 2 cats, there's just not much verbal communication going on. And that was when I learned, oh, my voice sounds absolutely awful. So
It doesn't sound that bad.
Well, thank you. I definitely sound sick, though.
Yeah, you can tell, but it's not
recovering
it's not bad.
from being sick, I suppose. And that's where things are at now. So I'm hoping that by tomorrow I will actually be well again, because that would be terrific. It's been an interesting week in politics. Of course, we got to talk about that real quick. I saw today that Tulsi Gabbard has actually been picked to be the Director of National Intelligence.
Yeah, I heard that, yeah.
That's an exciting development because she was the candidate that I preferred in 2020 during the Democratic primaries. Of course, she was a Democrat then. Now she's a Republican because she's like, no, you people are too woke. And that webcam is so shaky, and I'm so sorry, and I'm going to figure out a way to fix it at some point. You're just going to have to ignore it for now. People out there nobody's watching it live because we're not doing it live, but it's really, really bad. And I can see it on the screen there just shaking. The other one's not doing that, so it's something I'm going to have to look into later. Again, this wasn't designed for video recording when I set all of this up. So it's been sort of rushed job in the last few days because I'm only off on Mondays and Tuesdays. And Mondays I do the radio show, which has only 5 weeks left, I think, before it's only weekends, which is going to be great because then I actually will have 2 days off a week. And I'll still have to spend those 2 days off calling radio stations and doing the programming director stuff, but not having to go into Keene at 7 o'clock and be on the show for 3 hours is going to be a tremendous relief to my life. So really looking forward to that. Really looking forward to seeing what is going to come of this Trump administration as well. I don't like Trump. And what I said on Facebook was I'm really excited and interested in what I'm seeing these people doing, even though I hate the people involved. I don't hate them. I strongly dislike them. I'm not a fan of Elon Musk, but I'm interested in seeing him go in there and shake things up. Maybe kick some of these lifelong bureaucrats out of there, as he seems to want to do. He wants to audit the Fed and do some other things. And the analogy that I used was, I don't have to like Stalin to enjoy the sight of seeing Stalin beat the shit out of Hitler, right?
Yeah.
I can enjoy what is happening without liking any of the people involved.
Yeah, I think at the very least, it's definitely going to be different. And of course, some people have the perspective that's going to be different in an awful way. And then some people are a little bit more hopeful about it. Some people are super jazzed about Trump and his cabinet picks and a lot of the people that he is, putting different places. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
Is how I've been phrasing it. I'm not fully sold into... I guess I'm just protecting myself to not get let down.
Sure.
And a lot of people are just worshiping Trump and RFK Jr. and some of these other people like they're gods almost. And we see people do that all the time with politicians where they worship them.
It is unsettling how they do that.
Yeah.
I was just showing off the cat for the people who are actually watching the podcast because, kitties are... always welcome, and she's clawing at my legs as cats do. It's going to be an interesting time. I'm excited about what I'm seeing in cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Dogecoin got up to 43 cents today, and that's huge news. I was actually a little brokenhearted earlier. I looked into my Dogecoin wallet for some reason, and I saw that I had flipped 4,000 Dogecoin into Monero like 6 weeks ago because I needed Monero for my rent payment.
Yeah.
Anyway, I need over Monero, and like 4,000-ish Dogecoin right now is so much more.
Yeah.
Because it was like fractions of a penny then. If I still had that 4,000 Dogecoin, that by itself is more than a must rent for me easily.
Yeah. So
that sucks.
I haven't watched Monero too closely, but it seems like it's pretty consistent. Like it doesn't fluctuate as much as Bitcoin and some of the other cryptocurrencies do.
It certainly doesn't. I learned last night that Litecoin seems to follow along that same stability route as well, where over the last 7 years or so, Litecoin consistently stays between $40 and $80. I think it's high right now at like $87, but it doesn't explode to 90,000 or 4,000 like Ethereum did.
Yeah.
It just consistently stays at about that range. Whereas Dogecoin also goes crazy from fractions of a penny to 40 cents back to fractions of a penny. It's a weird animal.
Yeah.
And
why do you think it went up? Because of Elon Musk, or
I think Elon Musk, excitement around cryptocurrency right now in general, I think is propelling a lot of this because we expect a lot of changes in the cryptocurrency industry as a result of Donald Trump becoming president. And Elon Musk is a huge proponent of Dogecoin.
Yeah.
And which is crazy. He's such a huge fan of it that they're naming the new governmental agency Doge. And look, I don't know how to pronounce.
But was that intentional?
Yes.
Or that?
It had to have
okay.
been.
Well, I just thought it was like a joke or something. You know what I mean? Like a little whatever, like secret joke kind of.
Well, I mean, it's the Department of Government Efficiency, and Elon Musk is the head of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it had to be a shout out to Dogecoin.
Yeah.
And just the meme Doge in general. And I suspect that's playing a huge role in it. And I don't know what Doge is going to do, but I think it's going to continue going up for quite a while. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that Elon Musk is going to try to make Dogecoin legal tender. He may not be successful.
It's like a shit coin.
It is. Well, it's a meme coin. At this point, I don't know that it would qualify as a shit coin.
Okay.
Because you have things like Orange Coin and Popcoin and Kennacoin and thousands of other cryptocurrencies that launched during the ICO craze of like 2016, 2017 that just vanished and never gained any momentum. But Dogecoin has staying power.
Yeah.
Which I don't associate with a lot of shit coins. But it is shit, though. And okay, and we're back. Technical difficulties in regard to a cat who very helpfully stepped on the power button of my desktop. It's such a little power button, and there's so many places that she could stand or could step, but she magically always manages to hit the button, which of course immediately shuts down the computer. Luckily, vMix is smart enough that we didn't lose the video that we're recording. We didn't really lose anything. I just got to go in later and splice it. But that's enough talk about politics. The real question I want to get into today, and now we don't have a timer, but I do happen to know that the previous one was 10 minutes long, so I'm just watching it down there now, so that we're still at about the 30 to 45 minutes range. I never actually watched the Matt Walsh video.
Oh, you just watched it?
No, I never did.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
No.
I did watch it, but it was a while ago. I recently watched Am I Racist?
Okay.
And, I wasn't, like, it was kind of funny, but I wasn't, like, super impressed by it.
Well, Matt Walsh did a video where apparently he went around asking people, what is a woman?
Yeah, and he was going to women's marches and women's rallies and things like that and asking, like, seemingly biological women, what is a woman? And a lot of them were just, like, kind of refusing to answer it, or like nervous giggling, or and of course, like, a lot of people will just say like, oh, someone that says they're a woman. And in my opinion, you can't use the word in the definition. Like, that doesn't make for a strong definition, right?
Sure.
It's usually better if you use other words to provide more clarity when you're creating a definition.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. However, I don't find definitions as a whole to be very useful. Like, woman is a conceptual category, right? It's a concept, it's a category that we have created in our heads, and we categorize people into these categories based on characteristics that we have generally come to accept make them part of that category, but it's unique to each individual who makes the assessment. Like if I was to ask someone, is a hot pocket a ravioli? Like no one is going to consult the dictionary for the definition of ravioli to determine whether or not a hot pocket is a ravioli. However, for those curious, a hot pocket, you know, the little things, frozen things that people get, that 100% fits the definition from the dictionary of a ravioli.
Yeah.
So technically, according to the dictionary, a hot pocket is a ravioli. But of course, that's not how we really categorize things. If I was to ask you, is this a table or is this a desk? You're not going to consult a dictionary to determine which thing it is. Instead, and this philosopher in the 18th century, or maybe it was the 19th century, was the first one to really talk about this. It's called prototype theory, which is this idea that when we have these conceptual categories, we form prototypes in our heads of the essence of that thing. Like you have some image in your head, the essence of a desk, or the essence of a ravioli, or the essence of a woman. And when you're asked, is this thing that? You compare it to that prototype that you have in your head.
Yeah.
And if it's similar enough, whatever that means, then you say yes as part of that category. The problem with defining woman is that the problem with defining any conceptual category is that the definition has to give you the characteristics that are necessary and sufficient to mark an entity as belonging to that category and not leave out any entities that do belong to that category. And a lot of people try to resort to bizarre definitions to define woman in this thing. A lot of people will say things like, well, it's someone with a vagina. Well, okay, well then you're including post-op trans women in that definition.
Well, not necessarily, because you could argue that a neo-vagina is not a vagina.
Right, they certainly would make that argument, but then there are cases throughout history of, and I forget what the condition is called, but there are
Like a hermaphrodite?
No, there are genetic women who are born without vaginas.
Okay, wow.
It's very rare.
So
right?
like no
Obviously.
genitals at all?
Right.
Oh.
And it's very rare, but it does happen. But those people are still considered women, and those people would still be women, whether they have that vagina or not. And clearly then, if you can take this person who doesn't have a vagina and include her in the definition of, in your category of woman, even though she lacks this feature that you think is sufficient, then you're clearly using some other metric to make that assessment. And that assessment really is the prototype that we have in our heads about what a woman is. When I posted on Facebook that we're going to be talking about this, one person commented that it's a person who is nurturing and loving and protective.
So they're describing like the characteristics that are assigned by society to women.
I guess.
But not all women are nurturing and caring and loving and whatever.
She was describing, I think, what she believes a mother is.
Yeah.
But of course, not all women are mothers.
Yeah, and I guess stereotypically, like a lot of people will say that women are more nurturing than men.
Yeah.
Which also, like you're saying, isn't always true.
I think on average, though, and as a whole, it's probably true that women do tend to be more nurturing than men. I can't think of too many examples of men genuinely patting each other on the back and saying, hey, man, you got this, or maybe toward their kids. But on the whole, I think women are probably more nurturing. And this is one of the issues that we come into when we try to define woman or anything. There's always outliers. There's always ways where something that clearly belongs to that category doesn't have the characteristics that we think are sufficient and necessary for it to belong to that category. There's always going to be someone out there there's trans women out there who are absolutely gorgeous and indistinguishable from cis women, and you would never know that they were trans. But according to these definitions that people like to put forward, especially, they love going to chromosomes.
Yeah.
A woman is someone with 2 X chromosomes. Okay, that's fine, but you don't know the chromosomal makeup of the people you're meeting. Like when you meet you person who are making this allegation that this is what a woman is, you don't know that your wife has 2 X chromosomes. Have you ever had a chromosomal test done?
Yeah, and even like with that theory, I'll just speak for myself personally. I'm kind of just taking these scientists' word for it because I'm not that, like, I've never done that type of research. It's just like we're taught that women have two X chromosomes and men have an X and a Y or whatever. And that's just, what we're taught.
Yeah. The idea is crazy as well, to just think about a person genuinely believing that what separates men from women is their chromosomal makeup, but they don't know the chromosomal makeup of anyone they meet out there on the streets, but they readily and easily characterize this person or that person as a man or a woman, despite not knowing those chromosomal makeups.
Yeah. And I think this is also getting into like sex versus gender.
Definitely.
So gender would be like the social constructs of different characteristics that we are labeling men and women.
Right, like
And
nurturing or whatever.
Yeah, like having long hair and whatever. And sex more gets into like the biology of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, okay, you could say like a woman, like this, or a female, right? Because sex is female and male.
Right.
So a female would be someone with female reproductive organs like vagina and usually like ovaries, cervix, uterus, all of those things. And then we could get into like the differences of the hormonal matrix of men versus women. But then when we get into gender, it's more of those constructs. So I personally believe that we can't really change our sex. So someone, like even if they had bottom surgery, right? So either whatever, getting the neovagina. To me, that's not the same as like a biological woman's vagina. Because
certainly not.
They look different, first of all. And there is no way for us to even try to recreate the incredibly intricate nervous system that a vagina has.
Right.
So you can try to mimic it, but at the end of the day, it's just mimicking it. And I don't really think there's anything wrong with that. Like some people will say like, well, that's a transphobic statement. But to me, it's not really, because you can be a trans person who is female presenting. And it's like, you can say that my gender is female.
Right.
Because that's how you're presenting and that's how you want to be addressed. And yeah, I just don't see a way that we could change our sex.
No, certainly not. And I've heard the allegation that it's transphobic as well, but I'm a trans person. I don't know what kind of mental gymnastics people have to do to convince themselves that I'm somehow transphobic while being trans. But I agree with what you just said entirely. You don't change your sex. And even if you have bottom surgery, I mean, you shouldn't have bottom surgery.
Yeah, I mean, we could get into that in a whole, I could go off about that, and I'm sure you could as well.
I'm sure a lot of these horror stories that we see are just FUD. And like, that's not even the perspective I'm interested in. The fact that sex will never be as pleasurable for the recipient of the surgery is a huge issue.
Also, like all of the complications.
Yeah.
I mean, like I've heard some stories of trans people who have gotten bottom surgery and they either like have regret from it and then they detransition, or people who just still identify as a trans person. They're not necessarily detransitioning, but they just are having like really serious complications where they're having pain. They can't have sex.
I'm going to have to edit that because I muted both of us. But I don't know, like that's the part of it that I consider to be FUD, I guess, because we don't know which of those stories are actually true. Like there's countless Reddit posts of people saying, I had bottom surgery and now I smell like fecal matter. And it's probably just some right-wing troll out there who isn't trans at all.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know.
See, like, I wouldn't even, I guess to me, like, the stories I think of are interviews. Like, I know Blair White has done a few interviews with detransitioners, or not even necessarily detransitioners, but people who are just like, I got bottom surgery, and man, do I have, like, real live people that I'm seeing.
Well, people who make the claim that they've done that.
Yeah, exactly.
And like,
I
she's
guess
a propagandist. I wouldn't put it past her to lie.
Yeah.
But whether all of that is true or not, it does, like, you're not gaining anything and you're not giving your partners anything by having this surgery. there's a lot of mistaken concepts that people have when they go into this. They think it's going to make them more of a woman.
Yeah.
And like, that's crazy. If you're making the argument that you don't need a vagina to be a woman, then how in the hell is having a vagina supposed to make you more of a woman?
Well, I really feel for these people because they're experiencing a lot of dysphoria, right?
They are.
And for some trans people, so let's use the example of a male to female trans person. So a trans woman, we'll use that example. If their penis is giving them extreme dysphoria just by being there, I could see how to them the solution is, okay, these surgeons are selling me this surgery. They're going to tell me that my suicide rate's going to be lower. They're going to tell me that, they're kind of selling them this fairy tale in a sense.
Yeah.
And then when they get the surgery and then they have to use the dilators for the rest of their lives, and God forbid some of the other horrific complications I've heard of. I mean, and statistically speaking, I don't know if these statistics are legit or whatever, but statistically speaking, a lot of people who get bottom surgery, the suicide rate goes up. And I don't know if I don't know why, maybe because of the complications or whatever other aspects of it. I don't know. It's just, I think it really feels to me that these surgeons and these doctors who are doing these surgeries are experimenting on people. And I don't think they're being truthful. And I don't think there's full informed consent being given. So I really feel for these people who get bottom surgery and regret it. And listen, I'm sure there are some trans people who get bottom surgery and they're like, this is the best thing I've ever done. And they feel really good about it.
Sure.
I guess I just haven't been exposed to very many of those stories. And, even I Am Jazz, I don't know if you're familiar with I Am Jazz, but
I've heard of it, but
the poster child, trans kid, and her entire life has been televised. And then finally she turns 17 or 18 and she gets the bottom surgery, and her surgery was botched. And they had to do 3 or 4 surgeries after that to even fix it.
Yeah.
So it's okay, even this trans poster child who had the best surgeons allegedly, even her surgery got botched. So I just really think that there needs to be this needs to be talked about. And it seems like some of the people who are talking about it, whether they be doctors who used to work in the industry or even some trans people, are being silenced when they tell their story. I just think it needs to be talked about so people can make really informed decisions when they're thinking about this.
I mean, the medical aspects of it is certainly a concern, but I'm way more opposed to it because of the practical reasons. The fact that you're not going to get any extra benefit out of it that you're not already getting out of sex. You're going to lose a lot of benefit. And the reality of the situation is that you are turning your body, you're not getting a vagina, you're getting an inside-out penis.
Yeah.
You become a glorified fleshlight, a living fleshlight. And
because they don't get the pleasure that someone, like a biological female does.
They'll get some pleasure, right? Because there's still nerves in the penis that will survive and so on. So there'll be some. But it certainly won't be as pleasurable. And look, the reality of the situation is that if you want to have receptive sex with your partner, as a trans woman, you can do that already.
Yeah.
You can have anal sex, and both you and your partner will enjoy that more than turning your body into a fleshlight.
Yeah.
It brings no benefit other than treating the dysphoria of having a penis. And okay, if you're in that position where you literally cannot stand the sight of your genitalia, then maybe that is the only option for you if therapy's not working.
Yeah. And okay. So, and that's what I'm thinking is maybe there are things we can address, to get to the root of the issue, right? Because that's extreme dysphoria to the point where it's almost self-disgust.
Yeah.
And I think there are, I don't think the penis is the issue. I think there are other things that need to be addressed. And honestly, I think the mental health system is failing a lot of trans people who are genuinely struggling. I know so many people who transition and then, they're really well after, and, they don't really have any mental health concerns. They're not depressed or suicidal or anything. And they're being transitioning was the best thing I've ever done. And I'm so glad I did it. But I think for people who are having like real legitimate mental health concerns, if that's not also being addressed and doctors just kind of like transition them, then they're still going to be depressed after they transition. Like it's not, it just seems like it's kind of being sold as like the magic fix, you know, and it's not always that magic fix that people think it might be.
It definitely is being sold that way, both by therapists and by these surgeons that you mentioned. And a lot of this is that a person thinks that starting estrogen or getting facial surgery or wearing makeup or growing their hair out long or whatever is going to, quote, make them feel like a woman. And this is, I think, where the therapists, the psychologists out there are really failing people, because there is nothing ever that anyone will be able to do to make you feel one way or another way. If you don't feel like a woman already, putting on makeup isn't going to change that. Wearing a dress isn't going to change that. Getting bottom surgery isn't going to change that. You either feel like a woman or you don't. And I would suggest that this is entirely divorced from whatever genitalia you happen to have. If you can't stand the sight of your penis, it's not because it makes you feel like a man. It's because there's something else going on there. Because I'm of the opinion that a woman doesn't have to have a vagina. Like, I'm a trans woman, right? I'm of the opinion that a woman can have a penis and that a man can have a vagina. My boyfriend has a vagina. He's probably one of the most doodly men that I know. And I have no difficulty reconciling these concepts in my head. As weird as it is, right? I get it. It's weird. It's foreign terminology that it may even make people out there a little uncomfortable to even fathom some of these concepts, because it sounds silly when you say it. A woman can have a penis. A man can have a vagina. That runs so counter to what they learned in the first grade, which is that boys have PPs and girls don't, right? And that little idea forms the entire basis of their adult understanding of sex and gender. And if the totality of your understanding of these subjects can be reduced to a line that one first grader may say to another, then your understanding is insufficient, I would suggest. And it does sound silly, I recognize that. And I feel a little silly saying it. But that's how these things work. There's a lot of aspects going on here. It's not a simple matter, in my opinion, of biology and chromosomes. There are so many factors going into what makes a human being a human being. And trying to identify, I think it's probably a little silly to try to take all human beings and divide them into one of two categories in the first place. Am I as much of a woman as, I can't think of some, let's say Marilyn Monroe? Obviously not. Am I as manly as Mike Tyson? Obviously not. But this is because every human beings exist on this massive spectrum. If you lined up every single human being from most masculine to most feminine, most people would fall somewhere in the middle there, other than secondary sex characteristics that are obvious, like men have more prominent brows and more prominent jawbones and things like that make them a little more easy to identify. But that's not even universally true. But every human being falls somewhere on this spectrum. And if you take all 7 billion people on the planet, it's going to be a really smooth gradation from most masculine to most feminine. And you're not going to be able to pick some point on that spectrum to say, well, this is where the men start and this is where the women end.
I mean, I do think that categorization can be helpful. And then I think, in certain circumstances, like, I like to use the emergency room example, right? So if someone comes into the emergency room and they're like, I'm having a miscarriage, whatever, and that person is, I'm a woman, they present as a woman, but they have a penis.
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, no, you don't have those organs.
Right.
So I do think
Which
to
is
a
useful.
certain extent, yeah, like it can be useful because it's like, no, I need to know, like, are you a man or are you a woman? Like, what type of organs do you have, especially in the medical sense?
Well, that's fascinating because you don't really, strictly speaking, you don't really need to know whether they're man or woman. You need to know what organs they have.
Yeah.
And
So like,
whether,
I would say male or female,
Sure.
like what sex are you?
And asking their sex is just a shorthand way of determining what organs they most likely have. But it's not really the sex that you need to know. It's, do you have a womb? Or
Yeah, exactly.
Or
So using the miscarriage example, it's like if a woman doesn't, if she had a hysterectomy, it's like, okay, well, I can assume that you're not having a miscarriage.
Right.
Yeah, and even just doing a basic medical workup, it's like, I kind of need to know. I mean, if I have a biological woman, I'm not going to check her for prostate cancer, or you know what I mean? Like things like that. It's like there are biological differences that I do think the basic like male female camp is helpful for with categorization. And of course, like with the trans conversation, I mean, trans people are such a small minority of the population. Most people are going to be like presenting as their born sex or their born gender, right? So, yeah.
It's a complicated issue, and categories are useful for that purpose, for exactly that purpose of readily identifying what organs a person might have, at least the vast majority of the time. And in the healthcare setting, that's going to be very important. I haven't seen the latest research on it, but before I went to prison, there was one MD, some research biologist who does some really complicated stuff that I do not understand. But he was writing a paper and he was presenting this to us on TikTok in an easy to digest form. I haven't followed it up with it since, but he was working on a paper where he argued that after a certain amount of time, after one's transition, one's birth sex stops being a factor at all. Like in most medical cases, for example, with a trans woman, after having transitioned for a certain amount of time, you no longer really need to be screened for prostate cancer, because the possibility of you getting prostate cancer becomes zero, and you're more likely to get breast cancer at that point. So I haven't followed up with it, but I'm curious, and I haven't even thought about it since I got out of prison until right now, but I want to follow up with that.
The reason why I don't know if I necessarily agree with that is just because of the complicated hormonal matrix that men versus women have, where women have a fluctuating 28-day hormonal cycle where, like, so for example, like if I'm ovulating or if I'm menstruating, my hormones in my body and what I'm producing is going to be so different, like depending on the different days of my cycle, right? And I just don't think it's possible for pharmaceuticals in hormone therapy to really recreate that. So I get what you're saying about
men have hormonal cycles as well.
A 24-day cycle.
Right.
Or no, sorry, a 24-hour cycle.
I don't know what time frame the cycle is, but
yeah, so men have a 24-hour.
Postmenopausal people don't. People who no longer have periods wouldn't have such strong hormonal fluctuations. So it's not just women having those hormonal fluctuations, but a subset of women who have those fluctuations.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just very interesting, and maybe he is researching this, but I
and I don't have the research in front of me, and I haven't looked at it in well over a year.
Yeah, so. I'm just curious, because I have been kind of thinking of how these pharmaceuticals that are essentially mimicking hormones, like how that is affecting people. Because when I think about, I do a lot of work with women and the hormonal cycle and, hormone balancing and things like that for fertility and pregnancy. And just like my knowledge of the different hormonal cascades. And of course, like you mentioned, like there's influx person to person, but, I just don't see a way that pharmaceuticals could really mimic that. And we see that with women who are on the birth control pill. So they're on a pharmaceutical that mimics different levels of hormones and essentially negates their cycle completely. So women on birth control aren't getting that 28-day cycle, and they're getting a different influx of pharmaceuticals that are behaving as hormones. And just specifically in regard to birth control in women, we see a lot of hormonal imbalances because of that. We see a lot of like cancer and different diseases because of that. So I think it would be irresponsible if no doctors or scientists are studying how is this affecting trans people? Like how are these pharmaceuticals affecting trans people, or how is it really working in their body? And I think so many doctors like aren't even recognizing the importance of a female cycle. And, because they're like, oh, get on birth control. Like, you don't need a period. You don't need all that. But really, it is so important. And then, I can't speak to a male's 24-hour cycle as much because that's just not really relevant to my work and whatever. But yeah, I'm just interested to understand the implications of that. And I really do hope that somebody's doing that research, because I do think it's really important for trans people to know this, right?
Absolutely. So I guess the question is, what is a woman? And my answer is, it's a conceptual category that is only useful to you if you have a use for it. And if your concept of a woman isn't useful to you as it is, then you should change that concept. But to me, the question is irrelevant because I don't care what the definition is. I don't care what another person's conceptual categories are delineated as. To me, what matters to me is my concept of a woman and what I consider to be a woman. And I think that every single person out there is going to have their own variation of that. And they'll probably be similar in most respects to mine, but mine is probably going to be different from the vast majority of people listening to this, because in my conceptual category, women can have penises. And I don't have a clearly defined image of woman in my head beyond someone who presents as a woman, which, as you said, is a useless definition because it defines woman as woman, which isn't helpful. So what is a woman? I don't know. A woman, I don't know. And I don't care, really. I don't care. A woman is a person that I choose to call a woman if it's useful to me to call that person a woman.
Yeah.
That's a woman to me.
Yeah, I think I fall into the camp where typically if I'm defining the word woman, I would go to, typically that's going to be a person who has female reproductive organs. And of course, there are going to be some outliers. I would probably consider those people to be female presenting people. And I feel like that's fine.
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer. And like everyone out there doesn't have to agree on it. That's the beautiful thing. And that's another reason that the definition of woman doesn't matter. Like, just treat each other nicely. Just treat each other with basic human kindness. It costs you nothing to treat someone in a way that is polite and generous. If there's some trans woman out there that wants to be called woman, it literally costs you nothing to call them she, her. It doesn't damage your pride. It doesn't damage your understanding or your ego in any way whatsoever. Just be a decent person. That's it. And if they want to be called a man, do that. It's really easy to treat people with basic human decency and kindness and respect. And I think that is a more important thing to answer than the question of what is a woman. So thanks for listening, or thanks for watching, actually, if you're watching this debut episode. Sorry you had to stare at the side of my head for the last 40 minutes, last 20 minutes, rather, because it alternates back and forth between the two cameras. There was actually supposed to be 3, but I could not make the third one work. It worked briefly, and then it didn't, and I can't get it to work again. So I've got to buy a new webcam, one that actually is going to work, and I have to reposition this one so that it's not shaking the entire time. I honestly have no idea what is causing it to shake, because I'm moving a little bit, but not enough to be causing that. Is that actually my movement? It is my movement that is causing the webcam to shake.
I guess since it's so high up, it kind of is more sensitive.
That is insanely
to any
sensitive. Like,
sort of vibration.
Just nodding my head is making the webcam shake. And, wow, okay. Yeah, miscellaneous bugs to be fixed, but this is the debut video episode, so you gotta expect that. So anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Subscribe over at freetalkcast.com. That's the best way to stay up to date. Or subscribe to our Patreon, where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes video of Nikki and I talking a bit before the show started today. So check that out, and thanks for listening, and be kind to one another.